All right, so we had to hose off the wash rack after the bath. So it's a little bit wet, and we walked Prima around so her feet got a little dirty. But I did want to show the difference between a polo wrap and a standing wrap. So a polo wrap is used while we're working horses to wrap the legs, or we would use boots. I personally prefer polo wraps because they can be fitted very accurately to each horse and really give the tendons and ligaments more support, as well as restrict any excess mobility in the fetlock. A standing wrap is never used during work, and it's used for either healing up leg injuries or various treatments that we might do on the legs. So a polo wrap you use alone, and a standing wrap you always use with what's called a bandage or a quilt. Now, there's a lot of different products that are all called bandages in the horse business. So polo wraps can be called wrapping the legs, and standing wraps can be called wrapping the legs. But a polo wrap you use alone, a standing wrap you always use with a quilt. So the more modern quilts look like this, and they're called no-bow quilts because you can wrap them pretty tight and the pressure won't make the tendon bow out. That can be a cause if the legs are wrapped incorrectly or they're wrapped poorly, or if the wraps are left on too long. You run the risk of an injury where the tendon in the back of the leg can form a bit of a bow. So learning to wrap with standing wraps correctly is important, because standing wrap they're going to have on a longer time while they're standing in the stall healing up from a leg injury or getting a treatment. So these are the more old-fashioned quilts, and they actually are quilted. That's why they're called quilts, but they're also called bandages, leg bandages. So it's a little confusing, but these are kind of longer, and obviously these are both well used, but these are longer and thicker, so they're a little bit harder to put on, where these are a little easier to put on, and they're specifically designed not to bow the tendon. So the more modern bandage or leg wrap or quilt is called a no-bow, and these are the old ones that actually look like quilts. Both are just fine to use. So the first thing we're going to do is polo wrap the hind leg, and then we'll do the front leg. So the polo wrap is very different in texture than the standing wrap. The polo wraps are sort of thick and fleecy and a little bit stretchy. And the standing wraps are not very stretchy, and they're considerably thinner. So the difference in thickness is it's almost double on a polo wrap than it is a standing wrap. So the standing wraps are like a thin nylon material, and the polo wraps are always a fleecy, soft material. All right, so we're gonna polo wrap a hind leg first, which is particularly useful if the horse isn't developed well in the hindquarters or the back, and they're just learning to lift their back, they're just learning to stabilize their hindquarters. So when we wrap a hind leg, we can get the tail out of the way by just wrapping it around our wrist, like that, pull the tip through, and it makes a little knot. So it just gets the tail out of the way for wrapping the hind leg. This polo wrap is already ready to go, but I will show you how to wrap it after we take it off. So the first thing I'm going to do is ask her to just step and put some weight on the leg. Much better to wrap with weight on the leg than not. I'm going to face the polo wrap towards me, or the bulk of it facing me, and pull out the tail of it. When you wrap the legs, you're always going to wrap so that the tendons are pulled to the inside. So the direction of wrap on this left hind leg is going to be counterclockwise. The direction of wrapping on the right hind leg is going to be clockwise. So whenever you wrap, you want to pull the tendons to the inside. That's the direction that they spiral anyways. So then I'm going to begin the wrap by laying the end of it across the cannon bone in front, a little bit below the hock joint. Then I'm going to wrap once around, keeping the wrap parallel to the ground. I'm going to go once around, and then I'm just going to layer it up towards the hock joint one time, and it's really maybe 1/4 of an inch, if even that. So then once I have my initial 2 wraps, it's now secure in place, and I don't have to hold it in place. So then to wrap down, I want to space the wraps about midway to the last wrap. So I'm going to hit midpoint, midpoint. So I'm pulling the wrap down as I'm lowering it. And I'm keeping a light tension on it, giving it a tiny little tug across the cannon bone, but never a tug when it comes across the tendon. So then I get to the top of the fetlock joint. Now at the fetlock joint, I'm going to angle my roll downward. I'm going to go under the bottom of the fetlock joint and pull upward. So when we do the front leg, it creates a little V at the front of the fetlock joint, and we'll show you that when we do the front leg. So I have a little gap here, so I'm going to run the polo wrap once around there to cover that gap. Then I'm going to do a second angle where I pull the polo wrap down. I'm going to go under the fetlock joint again and make a little sling that pulls upward, but a little bit higher than the first one I did. Then I'm going to straighten out the polo wrap and go back up the leg. Whoops, this wasn't as long as I thought. I'm going to go back up the leg and cover. And then here's my piece of Velcro that will just show up when you get to the end of the roll. And then you secure it on like that. So that's how you wrap a hind leg with fetlock support. Not everybody does the polo wraps with fetlock support. Some people only polo wrap down to the bottom of the fetlock and then back up. Personally, I prefer always doing it with the fetlock support, which is a little sling with the polo wrap that just gently prevents the fetlock from sort of flexing too deeply, which can help stabilize suspensory ligaments, tendons, and when this joint is a little bit restricted, it can also help increase very gently the flexion of the hock and the stifle. So polo wrapping the hind legs can really add a lot of stability to the horse's movement. It's going to help stabilize the tendons and ligaments by acting like a snug sheath, kind of like the connective tissue in there should do already. And it's going to restrict excessive mobility of the lowest joint. So it helps stabilize the use of the hindquarters considerably. If I'm going to polo wrap only one set of legs, most people will do the front set of legs but not the hind set of legs. I do the opposite. I would rather, if I'm only going to polo wrap 2 out of the 4 legs, I'll polo wrap both hind legs and maybe leave the front legs alone, because it makes a bigger difference when the polo wraps are on the hind legs. I also prefer polo wraps over boots because once you learn to do this, I put them on faster than I can get boots on, and the fit or the tightness and snugness of them is far more accurate and useful than a boot that's a little bit loose or doesn't quite give as much support. So then we'll do, oops, I got to unwrap. So when I unwrap, I'm going to pull the Velcro off. And I'm just going to wind it back up in my hand as I unwrap. Right? So then I'm going to use the same polo wrap to do the front leg, but I have to re-roll it. So to re-roll it and have it ready, I take the Velcro and I'm going to stick Velcro to Velcro. So I'm going to start at the top of the roll, put the Velcro together. These are obviously well-used polo wraps. And once it's stuck together and makes that little rectangle, I start at the very top and roll in the same direction, right? So I'll do that again. When you take your wrap off, there's the Velcro and there's the Velcro. So I'm always going to stick the Velcro together before I wrap and then continue rolling in the same direction, right? So there's nothing worse than putting your Velcro or rolling from the top the wrong way, and you get to the bottom and the Velcro's on the wrong side, right? So you wrap the whole leg and you get to the Velcro and it's not in the right place. Then I want to wrap this. The tighter you make the wrap as you're doing it, I can give it a little tug. I could put it up against a wall and kind of roll it like that, or use my hands to roll it. But the tighter you roll it, the easier it is to put on the legs. And then when you store it, you can just tuck the little ends in either side and store it like that, so it's ready to go for the next use. Right, so now we're going to do a front leg on the same side, I think because of the sunlight issue. But again, when I'm going to start the wrap, if I start the wrap with the bulk of the roll on this side, my Velcro will come out backwards. Can you see that okay? Right? So when I start the wrap on either side, I want to pull the tendons in. So if I were on this side of the horse, oops, sorry about the sun. If I were on this side of the horse, my wraps are going to go this way. And if I'm on this side of the horse, my wraps are going to go this way. To make sure you come out with the Velcro in the right place, you want your wrap tail closest to the horse's leg and the bulk of the unwrapped part of the polo closest to you, right? So on this side, because I want to wrap that way, I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to start across the cannon bone a little bit and hold it in place just below the carpus, or what we call the knee. And I'm going to wrap once around to hold it in place, and then I'm going to go up slightly, just about 1/4 of an inch on my next wrap. So now, perfect timing, if she moves, it's not going to all fall off. It stayed in place as I sort of moved with her. So then I'm going to do the same thing. The front cannon bones are much shorter than the hind cannon bones, so this wrap will fit a little better. I'm going to go down to the top of the fetlock joint, then I'm going to angle it and make a sling underneath the fetlock joint and pull up slightly. Then I'm going to go around the back to cover up that little gap of hair. And she's got dirty feet now. And there's my little V. So then as I make my second wrap a little higher on the fetlock joint, the front of the polos should come together with this little V when you do the fetlock support. If you're just wrapping to the top of the fetlock, it'll go straight around. But when you do the sling under the fetlock, which should resist the mobility of the fetlock slightly, so it's pretty snug, it should make a V right there. So then I'm just going to go back over my wraps, back up to the top of the leg. Whoops. There's my Velcro. So as I come around, the Velcro fastens to the outside. Ideally, it's nice to have the Velcro really on the far outside of the leg so the hoof doesn't undo it. Like if they interfere while they're moving and the Velcro's on the inside, sometimes they can undo the Velcro while you're working. So it's best if the Velcro lands on the front or the outside. It can be a little around the back or it can be on the inside, but you just want to be careful with that. So, and then again, when I take it off, I'm going to undo the Velcro and just sort of roll it as I take it off. So when I take it off, it's just going to make a blob because I'm going to have to open it up to re-roll it anyways. And when I re-roll it, again, Velcro to Velcro, keep on rolling in the same direction. And then it's ready for the next use, as long as you have that bulk of the bandage closest to you and the tail closest to the horse. And that's polo wrapping.